Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Prince George's County Recreation Blue Ribbon Work Group. We are here to get started with one of our new meetings. And before we do, I will pitch it to Donna Herring, our work group chair. Madam Chair.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 2:06 p.m. Please be advised this meeting is being recorded for documentation purposes. Mr. Middleton, would you please call the roll?
Give me one moment, please. Okay, Donna Herring.
Here.
Chuck Montry.
Here.
Not Barbara Heller, apologies. Bill Sheehan.
Present.
Gino Wren.
Here.
Kathy Stasny.
Present.
Kevin Roth.
Here.
Rhonda Dallas.
Present.
Stephanie Neal. Okay, we'll just give Stephanie a moment. Wanda Ramos.
Here.
And we do not have several members. Just give me a moment. I'll make note of who we do not have. Just give me one moment, please.
Okay.
It appears we do not have delegates Andrea Harrison or Delegate Faye Martin Howell. We do not have Senator Joanne Benson. We do not have Ryan Jackson. We do not have Matthew Onohafe, and we do not have Marcus Smith. But that is who is absent from today's meeting, but we are at quorum.
Okay, great. With that being said, can I get a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and it's been seconded. I will bring the agenda to the floor. I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 15th, 2002 meeting of the Prince George's County Recreation Blue Ribbon Work Group. This work group was established for the purpose of conducting a study and providing recommendations to the Prince George's County Council on ways to improve access to the existing youth sports, arts, and recreation programming available to residents, improve access to publicly owned facilities, fields, and gyms, improve access to opportunities for county-based minority-owned and small businesses, assess potential cost benefits, advantages and disadvantages of possibly transferring the responsibility for specific existing recreation operations from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission to a different entity, and identify how a different entity could fund the cost of any potential financial deficiency or adverse consequence. We have retained the services of Barry Dunn to assist with this project, and will now turn the floor over for their update.
Thank you very much, Chair Herring. Appreciate it. Ryan, I think I'll need hosting. Oh, you've given it to me. Thank you. Thank you all for coming today, and we are going to provide you with some update of our findings thus far. We're going to take you through a little bit of a process, come back a little bit and show you how some organization, how the typical organization is designed, and then compare that to how the Parks and Recreation Department and MNCPPC is designed now in its functionality. And then we're going to ask them to have a little bit of discussion. We have a couple of questions for you to discuss at the end, and then we will be looking at next steps. So I'm going to apologies, couldn't get my window up. Can everyone see my screen? Excellent.
Yes.
Great.
Not seeing
Excellent.
the
Okay.
presenter mode, Lisa.
I'm sorry.
Now we are. Thank you.
Yeah,
We're all
it
set. Thank
seems
you.
a little bit slow, so my apologies to everybody. It's a little delay. All right, so here we are. Our agenda for today, it is the review of the current environment, as I mentioned before. Traditional recreation service provisions. We'd like to really give you sort of a 101 on what this looks like so we can get some background information, and then to provide you with some information about our understanding of MNC-PPC. We will have a work group discussion, and then we will discuss next steps that will involve these four things. If there aren't any questions, I'll move on. Great, thank you. Okay, just a little bit of some of the information that we've given you all along with these updates, just to let you know where we are. We are still at that stage of gathering data, data gathering and analysis that we will continue through January of 2023. So we are in the thick of this. And then obviously our intent is to finish this project in April of 2023. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danny Wilson, who's going to take us through the next few slides.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. So we wanted to take a moment today to set the stage for our planned discussion that will occur in a little while. And as mentioned earlier in that review, we're really trying to make sure we focus on that desire of the work group to determine, how can we improve programming efficiencies and access? So what we wanted to do today was talk briefly about traditional recreation service provision and review things like, well, what are some of the types of recreation, types of facilities that are offered, different activity spaces, the types of service areas, the program categories, and the traditional agency functions that happen. And Lisa, if you don't mind showing us that next slide, that'll demonstrate just the flow of the next few slides we have coming up. There we go. So those are the topics that we'll cover just briefly as mentioned. And the first one is the traditional types of recreation. So if we look theoretically at what is recreation service provision, there's active recreation and passive recreation. And Lisa has a slide for us to demonstrate kind of a spectrum on where that happens. So from an active type of recreation, usually that's more structured and more organized. And kind of conversely, or on the other end of the spectrum, passive forms of recreation are not as organized formally. There's just an opportunity to enjoy leisure spaces at your convenience. An active program typically has higher levels of physical exertion. Passive can sometimes be more sedentary in nature. We have this competitive versus non-competitive, group-oriented versus individualistic, and registration-based programs are typically under the active category, and passive can be more of the drop-in. And as mentioned, there's a spectrum of opportunities all along from the active to passive side. And you'll see some examples of those different types of recreation at the bottom in the blue sections. There's a team sport opportunity that might be more active in nature versus an opportunity to walk on a trail or to go watch, take some photographs of birds, for example. So when we think of those types of recreation and active and passive, then we think of the typical types of facilities that those sorts of activities happen in. So there's a wide variety and range of spaces and places where we recreate. And traditionally, neighborhood community centers, regional recreation centers, parks, schools, partner facilities like in the case of MNPPC, Boys and Girls Club, or there are sometimes specific athletic facilities like a natatorium. And this is where recreation programming can happen and recreational experiences can happen. And inside those spaces, some of the typical activity spaces you might find indoors are things like gymnasiums and multi-purpose rooms, art rooms. There might be a walking track inside of a building. Versus outdoor, we do have a plethora of activity spaces available to us as well. Trails, state parks, there are outdoor swimming pools, etc. And recreation programming occurs both indoor and outdoors, active and passive. It all happens in these spaces concurrently within any given park and recreation system. And as programming is planned, some of the traditional service areas we might see are community events, or there might be a different line of service altogether where specific rental of some of those amenities that an agency has might be rented out. An entire facility might be rented out, and there might be a plethora of programming. And it's usually what we see is those programs can take on a variety of shapes and sizes and forms, often in different categories. And so what we see is on the screen here is the variety or a sampling of a variety of categories that these programs can fall into. Arts programs and nature and outdoor based programs, the sports programs. And so as we think of a typical park and recreation agency's fulfillment of a community's recreation and leisure needs, a lot of times we do think of these traditional categories on how programs are offered. But what we also need to think about is how those programs are offered. And so from a function perspective, traditionally what we'll see is in that green box, those things we think of are operations of park services, those programs that are both planned and then implemented, and then the facility operations. Excuse me. So if you think of maybe an example of a 5K race that an agency might be hosting, that's the service being provided and planned and implemented maybe by your programming team. That programming team is supported by the park in which that trail exists where that 5K might occur. And at the end of the 5K, perhaps the award ceremony occurs inside of a school or a community center. So those three teams will work together to provide that service. We cannot forget, though, that that blue box supports the entire function altogether. The finance and administration team makes sure that the registration dollars are collected efficiently and responsibly. And the human resources department, a team might help make sure that there are staff to make this all happen. The IT folks will help perhaps do the race timing, and the maintenance team will help upkeep the entire operations spaces and places. So when we think of how recreation is provided, we have to remember that all of these functions work in tandem to provide service to the community. We wanted to take a moment to review just in a brief scenario what a traditional system might look like on how recreation services are provided. And so now we're hoping that now that we've set that stage, we can dive into a little bit more about how MNCPPC's current environment is structured and give a little background and base to that part of the conversation. So Lisa, I pass the mic back to you.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it. I just want to make sure I am in the right slide. Sorry. Yeah, so hopefully this kind of, as Danny said, set the table to give you some background information on sort of how we originally looked at this, at the information that the enormous amount of information that is the system that is MNCPPC's system, and dialing it down to focus just on their particular organization. We want to call out this important fact that may not be known by the panel or some of the public, but the agency just went through a recent reorganization, and it was a reorganization to centralize services and to create efficiencies. The outcomes of that are to have more collaboration across divisions, to be able to provide less duplication of services, especially in the facilities, maintenance, and operations places, and then also to have more specialized maintenance and program staff that are directly related to the divisions that they should be. They're now 6 months in to this reorganization. So, and from words that they've given me, they are still open to change, and they know that this is an agile process and it has to be. But they did this for all the right reasons, to understand a little bit better how to provide better service delivery to the community. One thing that is of note, and that the agency understands that they are still in development on, is developing key performance indicators so that there is some measure of success as we move forward with this reorganization. But I wanted to sort of pull this out here so that everyone understands that they are an agency in transition. Nothing was necessarily broken before, but they seized an opportunity in time and recognizing the need for some change, and seized that opportunity in time to make some necessary changes. And right now they're going through that change management process. So the current structure of Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, just to give you a bird's eye view of this, is in the blue box on the top is the bi-county corporate management operations. And then, of course, we have the split between Montgomery County and Prince George's County. Under Prince George's County, there are 3 departments: the Parks and Recreation Department, the Planning Department, and then, of course, the Planning Board. For our purposes and for this study, we are going to be looking directly at this, the circled box, which is the Department of Parks and Recreation. And to further illustrate, that box breaks out into this organizational chart. You've seen this one before, but I wanted to sort of give you the understanding that there is a much larger structure that is above this, but this particular organizational structure and the services that it provides under the department are vast and very varied.
Lisa, I had a quick question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back 2 slides, I think it was?
Yep.
Yes. So with this reorganization, was there any discussion or decisions made about any type of ERP that would help to facilitate all the needs that need to happen for efficiencies? Like any type of system?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I will turn that over because I'm not sure I could answer that fully, but I would turn that over to Wanda or Bill from the commission, from the agency.
Okay.
Wanda, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for you right now on that. I can get back to you on the information you request on this one.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Lisa and Wanda.
Sure. And I'll take a pause right here to see if there are any other questions from the group before I move on. Okay. So here we are back at the more detailed organizational chart, so that you can see all of the services that fall under each one of the division. And this is the updated chart that is what the reorganization is depicted here. And just to back that up too, and for point of reference, that reorganization was named Synergy. That was the name of the process or the project itself. So, okay, so now we're going to dive down a little bit into that specific Parks and Recreation Department to roll through a little bit of what it actually looks like. This is a simplified organizational chart. And you can see the department is comprised at the top in sort of that overarching support services being financial management, park police, and human resources, those things that touch all of the other divisions that fall under the department. To your left, you'll see recreation and leisure services. And under that are Northern Recreation and Leisure Services, Southern Aquatics and Athletic Facilities, Youth Sports, and Special Programming. And then in the middle is Administration and Development, Park Planning, Public Affairs, Information Tech or IT, Management Services, and Special Projects Unit. And on the right-hand side, you see Parks and Facility Management, which comprises the Northern region, the Southern region, Arts and Cultural Heritage, Park and Facility Services, and then Natural and Historic Resources. So we've taken the step now after the information that we've derived from the organization and from our data gathering to simplify that a little bit more to show you how this is divided up. In the orange boxes, you'll see the areas that really are about programming, direct programming to the public. Northern, Southern, Aquatics, Youth Sports, Special Programs, Arts and Cultural Heritage, and Natural and Historic Resources. One of the questions that we had initially was, okay, now since Arts and Cultural Heritage and Natural and Historic Resources are under Park and Facility Management because they are, in essence, facilities, should we be looking at that as part of this study? Well, there are programs that are actually that fall within those facilities. So for all intents and purposes, we are lumping those together with the other orange designations. In the purple, you can see Park Planning, Northern Region, Southern Region, and Park and Facility Services. Those are facility-driven divisions, if you will. And those are areas that we will not necessarily be, we will not do our primary analysis on, but we'll put that on hold for a minute while I talk a little bit about the ones that are in the light blue: Public Affairs, Information Technology, Management Services, and Special Projects Unit. So these are some of the areas that we know are going to have an overarching, they already do have an overarching support service for, like the ones that are in the financial management, park police, and human resources. Those are support services that are necessary for all the ones in the orange and in the purple to function. And those are areas that we are now looking into to divide up and figure out how to actually tease out what portion or percentage of those things have to go if in this bifurcation study. Park Planning, Northern Region, Southern Region, and Park and Facility Services are the secondary level of analysis, in that is really that really has to do with those facilities. But as we talked about before, there's some gray areas in that as well. So to kind of dial this back a little bit more and to kind of give you both a bird's eye view and then a focused view on how we see this and what we have been doing in our analysis, is to take that left-hand side snapshot of the areas that we have divided up and how we're looking at those, and to kind of see them in a different way. And that is to understand that programs and services is possible because of direct support from parks and facilities, and then indirect and very important support from finance, human resources, and IT. And with that, we're going to draw some comparisons now to really what that looks like from a financial and budgetary perspective. And I'm going to turn it over to JR to walk us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Lisa. So last time we met, I went through some tables with you, really trying to highlight the scope of the recreation specific expenses we had. It was a review of the line item detail of the Recreation Department's direct services budget as it was provided. And it was huge, right? It was $129 million of expenses and revenues. On the revenue side, we're talking about 4,000 plus line items over 41 revenue funds. And on the expenditure side, we're talking about 11,000 plus line items over 37 expenditure funds. Sorry, not line items, lines of data. It's less line items. Sorry, Lisa, do you mind going back? Thank you. But all of that's to say, it's a really complicated analysis, and it's a complicated thing to tease apart. And the reason it's so complicated to tease apart is, again, you have these direct expenses, but then you also have indirect expenses that you have to apply to it. And not everything is a clean calculation that's available to us to analyze. As you're trying to figure out the true cost of orange, you also have to figure out costs of purple and costs of blue there. And then there's also funding, direct funding that's in funds that for recreation services that we still don't have the information for, which is, for instance, facility support that's in the park fund, and we haven't been looking at the park fund. So as we dive into really trying to identify the true costs of these various recreation services, the key point here is it's incredibly complicated, and everything is very much intertwined through a series of supporting setup. Next slide, please.
I will take this from here, JR.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going
Thanks,
to
Lisa.
stop, but I'm going to stop right there and ask if there are any questions about that financial piece of things. We gave just one example, and I wanted to make note here that we had a really good initial, or one of our initial conversations with the finance and budget division, leadership management with the agency, and learned a lot of this stuff. And that was just late last week. So we're probably, we're actually, JR's in the midst of really defining more of some of those transfer line items that really are part of teasing out that, if I go back one, that the purple and the blue piece of things that he explained. And again, I'll ask if there are any questions as we move forward. Okay. JR, anything to add to that? Okay, great. So just wanted to clearly depict the connection to this study's progress. And on the left-hand side, you want to kind of wrap this up by saying current environment analysis is in process. We are still analyzing programs, that fiscal piece of things and the organizational piece of things. Now, what does that look like moving forward? And then our next step is to investigate these scenarios. First, Barry Dunn needs to the work group's validation of these three scenarios. The first one being bifurcation, or bifurcating recreation program functions, bifurcation of the entire department, and third, continue to be provided by Maryland National Capital and Parks and Planning Commission. And so what we're asking you to do at this point right now is we're asking you this question as a work group. Does the work group agree with the recommended scenarios? And I'll stop right there so that we can have a little bit of discussion about that.
And actually, Lisa, I'll just jump. I recall that we have one more slide to demonstrate the summary.
Yep.
And I also want to say that
Thanks, Danny.
that first scenario does, you want to associate colors. The programs and services are all the orange divisions we had identified.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question, please? Will you be analyzing staffing levels and management to staffing ratios and things along your more workforce structural issues?
As it pertains to operations, we will not necessarily, and I'll actually ask Barbara to chime in on this as well, as she is sort of our guru on this piece of things. But one of the things that we will look at is exactly what that staffing scenario would look like, corresponding to the operations that have to be that would be bifurcated or moved over to a different division. Barbara, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Well, and so the gentleman that asked the question, so you would be interested in knowing kind of like a management or administrative overhead versus staff. Tell me a little bit more about your question.
Yeah, my question, Gina Wren, I represent the employees that deliver the services.
Yes.
My question is pertinent in my mind, because in order for us to make informed decisions on cost effectiveness and other related issues, we have to, I would think we need to better understand whether the frontline services are adequate to either to deliver the current services and to potentially enhance services, because that will drive costs. If part of the discussion becomes enhancing services to Prince George's County residents, then we're going to have to determine where that money comes from. And
yes,
we're going through that with the Montgomery County government, that same exercise. So we can assure that we're not paying too much for management and other expenses versus delivering services to the clients or to the public.
yeah, we will be able to get into that, because yeah, you're right. I mean, that would be an important indicator of how efficient and effective the organization is. So yeah, we will be taking a look at that, and it would be interesting to be able to compare that to any kind of national average. But nonetheless.
Hi, honey bunny, I'm gonna call you back in about 10 minutes. I'm on a Zoom call.
Oh, okay.
I'll call you back.
So yeah, and because that's important to know if it's a function of, do we have enough staff to be able to deliver the services that are needed, or do they need to be augmented?
Right.
And JR, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that.
If I might, I'm going to speak to Ryan. If I may, Ryan, what I think before we make any kind of decision on any of the suggestions that are put before us here, I'm going to ask Ryan to provide for this work group a meeting with, or an overview with, the current Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Director and the staff. We need to have a complete overview of how Maryland National Capital Park and Planning is currently operating. I think that that's extremely, extremely important, because I can't make a decision relative to whether or not we should continue to be the services for recreation should be provided. I can't make that decision. I think that we need to hear from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning's current staff, and that would be the director, I think, is Peter Shapiro, and I really do need to, I think that we need to have a complete overview from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. Quite frankly, I think that that's something that should have happened in the first place.
Yes, ma'am, we can work on that. So definitely
That needs to happen before we make this decision here.
well, no, I don't think any final decisions are being made right now. I think we're just having discussion.
I'm sorry.
I don't think any final decisions are being made right now. I think we're just having discussion.
I've got that. I understand clearly. I know the decisions are not, but I think we need to stop and have a Maryland National Capital Park and Planning to step in to see, to give us a complete overview of Maryland National Capital Park and Planning and how it currently operates, including the budget.
I have a question. So can we go back one screen? So for A, continue to be provided by Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. So were you all considering having a meeting where they could give an overview when we get more information about that scenario, or was it not something you plan to do?
I'll interject here. We as a team, the four of us from Barry Dunn, have a visit scheduled to meet with the staff on January the 10th. And what might be helpful, but you guys might think differently, but what might be helpful is let us meet. We'll have some parameters around what we're looking for. I mean, to simply have the staff come and talk about their operations, we need to provide them with some direction about what it is that they need to focus on. And we'll be able to identify that through our meeting. So I would like to just suggest that maybe after that meeting might be the best appropriate time to talk about their operations. I think that's an excellent idea to have them talk through, but just as a suggestion, maybe wait until after January 10th.
I agree, but shortly after your meeting with them, can you invite Mr. Shapiro to also participate in the meeting when you share your findings from the January 10th meeting?
Yes, certainly. We'll see. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So just wanted to say it will be Chair Peter Shapiro, and it will be Director Bill Tyler will be the two main players here.
Okay, thank you. I also had another question as far as when we were speaking about the different responsibilities for staffing. So based for each of these three scenarios, you all have the A, B, and C. You will identify, like, for example, if it's continued to be provided by Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, you'll identify if you feel that the staffing is already not adequate to service our current programs, and if it changes and stays under them, whether additional staffing is or isn't needed, correct? I mean, that'll be part of each scenario, right? The staffing piece?
Yeah, that's going to be a really important component to it, because typically a park and recreation agency would have about 60% of its operating expenses associated with labor. So that's a real big piece of it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it was going to have its own little bucket, of discussion. Any more questions before we move forward? Oh.
Yes, actually, you know what? I would say the scenarios, this is Danny from Barry Dunn, that you see on the right-hand side of the slide, the A, B, and the C. The letter A is the one that we wanted to make sure we hone in on the most today. So when we think of recreation program functions, it would be those divisions that were depicted in orange, that any division that currently provides some form of programming would be considered in that letter A scenario. If we have the work group affirmation on that today, what that helps us do is start to dig in specifically with, for example, finances specific to those divisions. So that will help us lead the group to those final decisions that were depicted in those blue boxes. That those were the outcomes of this entire study we were looking to achieve. So when we are asking about the scenarios, we're looking just maybe to for sure affirm note letter A on this slide. And Lisa, feel free to jump in.
Nope, thank you, Danny. That is the question at hand right now.
I have a question. And when you the letter A, bifurcate recreation program functions to go into a quasi-government, I imagine agency similar to revenue, or just to go through the county, under the county government. You know my answer on this one. I think I like the scenarios. But I just don't know if or bifurcate the entire department again to go to a different entity, right?
Mhm.
according to the legislation.
So yes, the first decision would be, are we investigating these three scenarios? And then based on the determination, the outcome of what that scenario would be, then we can look at the oversight, whether it be by the county or whether it be by, for example, some other form of district or municipal entity. So
Yep.
we're kind of thinking of it as a step 1 and step 2, if you will, or a part 1, part 2.
So you're saying basically, for A, you would, basically these three items are all ones that need to be researched and analyzed, correct? You're going to start with A. And part of that will be us getting into the different subcommittees and doing analysis of all of whatever it's containing, correct? Then we would look at B to determine B and C after that to determine, right, if everything goes or if it stays under planning. I mean, correct or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Danny, I didn't want to step on your toes, but I would say yes. And I would not say that there are clear steps in this. Only that those are the three scenarios that we will have analysis on, that they won't necessarily be taken 1, 2, and 3 is what I'm saying. We'll be working on all three scenarios simultaneously. JR, would you agree with that?
Yes, the difficulty here is going to be giving real, as accurate as possible estimates of how much programs cost and how much the operation costs, given the fact that there are indirect costs that are tied in other funds.
But don't you have to kind of determine A first to know, I mean, because we're not just saying we're going to leave the existing services, we may need to add to, correct? So we need
Yep.
to determine that before we can say if we're going to move the entire department or not. Because we don't know if it will work under Maryland National Capital Park and Planning or take the whole department out without knowing what the recreation piece will look like, correct?
Yes, I think you're accurate in that. I think figuring out the program cost is certainly the way to go, the way to start. And that's also where we can probably give you the most accurate estimates of how much it costs. And then as you build upon all of the services that support the programming, that's where things get more complicated.
Right, and part of the programming piece would be us discussing if there's a need for additional services in other parts of the county that may or may not have them there, or just rearranging it, correct? Like, do we need more sports? Do we need more?
A level
I
of
don't know.
service analysis.
Right, exactly. So that could change things up. So I think that's a big piece, and we would need to have a lot of discussion around that before we discuss moving the entire department or not. Correct? Or
Yeah,
not?
I agree. So, okay, so it's really like, focusing the discussion on cost of service and then level of service analysis, and then making determinations on the best way to move forward once we have a firm understanding of that.
Okay.
Kathy Statmaker, I have at least a second. I'm just a nuts and bolts person, and I'm just trying to understand. So we need to know what the cost is presently of the services, what the services are, and what the cost is.
Right.
And then once we know that, then if it's, and then that's if we're not going to enhance anything. But if you're going to enhance, then what is the cost of that? But then what is to move it to a different agency? If the idea is to save money, how is that going to happen? And that's just rhetorical. And then, or if it's going to move to the county government, again, if we're supposed to be looking at saving money or enhancing services, keeping costs the same, I think that's kind of important to know. Because
And I
if we're going
think-
to enhance, right, Ms. Herring, if we're going to enhance services, I mean, I think realistically that probably does increase cost unless you
Exactly.
decrease a service somewhere else.
Right, and I think another piece of it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, JR or Lisa, anyone. We're also supposed to look at any possible additional funding from other sources, is that correct? If we were to enhance, is there a way to get funding elsewhere to support that enhancement?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that was going to be my question. I mean, savings could potentially be found and shifted to enhancements if you restructure, potentially. It's not always the case, but there's a potential there. The question I think that we all are concerned about is, let's presume for a moment that we recommend enhancements in A, B, and C program. And that is going to cost more than current resources. I think part of it's going to be answering where is that extra money coming from? And is the taxpayer willing to make that additional investment? Those are complicated questions.
And just if getting additional funding is even realistic. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Any more discussion on this slide? Oh, I'm sorry, please.
If I will jump back, this is Danny Wilson again. That part of what we were asked to do is determine whether all or part might be bifurcated. So what we would like to just make sure we're clear is that we are recommending that if we're investigating the part, the individual part, that it will be all of the orange sections. And I don't hear much dissension of that. So we will continue on with those orange being that scenario one, where letter A, where it would be the recreation program function. So just wanted to clarify on record that it sounds like that's the direction we would move forward as we explore the various options on the table.
That's correct. I think the delegate I think there's a question.
Yes, I have a question. When you're talking about the entire department, is that indicated by a color on your chart?
I'll go back a couple.
Yeah, Lisa.
Actually, we can just go to either one of these, but what Danny was talking about in scenario one is programs and services. And scenario two is looking at the orange as well as the purple. And
I'm sorry, Lisa, there was another slide that kind of showed it all. Well, yeah, maybe one more. That one.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Please continue.
So this is the entire department. Yeah. And then the recreation function and depicted in 2A on the previous slide that we were on before, where the scenarios would be all in orange.
But your item B that said the entire department, you mean this entire slide, everything that's right? I think that was.
Yes.
Right. But are we going to see information from you on this entire group of things, or just on the things in yellow or orange? Because I don't see how we can make that determination if we don't know much about the Parks and Recreation Department.
You're right. We need to show you both.
Right.
When you talk about a department that is the size of Maryland National Capital Park and planning, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we as a group, as a group here, as a work group, how do we peel back all of these things so that we can be intelligent in making our decision? I do agree that that as we look at this, if we don't have anything to compare it with, and that's why I said the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning is extremely important. We need to see that side of the story. It's very important, as far as I'm concerned, that we take a look at both sides of the story. We're not interested in doing anything that's going to be more costly to the citizens that we serve. And I'm even more concerned about the impact that it's going to have on the people who have retired and given years of service to this organization, who are profoundly dedicated and interested in what's going on. Many of them still volunteer and do things with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. So I'm just trying to figure out, I'm not so sure that I have a clear understanding of how these pieces are going to really fit. I mean, you talk about one thing and then all of a sudden you have to peel back and there's something else, and you peel back and there's something else. I think there are a lot of layers to this, what we're talking about here. That's what I'm a little concerned about. I don't have my I'm not sure that I have my head around what we're trying to do here. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I agree with Senator Benson. This can be a huge project. So that's why I was asking about the staffing piece and maybe the salary, the whole.
I agree with you.
Yeah, the whole staffing and salary piece, that's like a whole project in itself. So I think we have to determine, like, I don't know what everyone else is thinking, but, you know, we are trying to provide access by more residents. So I don't see how we could possibly decrease. We may have to kind of look at things to make things more efficient to be able to do that and give more access and things like that. But in order to say that anything about reducing staffing, I think that's a whole entire project in itself. So
Yeah,
I don't think I don't think we can say, you know, in this project, any specific staffing cuts or anything like that, because that's a whole nother project that we need to be done. It's a whole nother study.
I'm certainly not saying that there are things within the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning that need to be looked at, and there's some things that need to be drastically changed. I'm not saying that, but I'm not so sure that we have all that we need, all the tools in the toolbox that are needed in order for us to move forward to determine what should be separated, what should be not separated in this. But we do have, there's a lot that we need to be looking at. This
I
is
agree.
Marcus' task here.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
hoping.
I see that my delegate has something that she wanted to say. Delegate Howell?
No, I had already asked my question about the whole department.
Well, this question is to Barry Dunn. I'm assuming that in the next upcoming meetings that we have as a group, an entire group, work group, as well as the subcommittees, that all of these details will be discussed going forward. Now that you've kind of put out here what you're considering as recreation services versus the entire department versus, you know, whatever. Now we are actually going to get into the nuts and bolts and look at the specifics for each area to get a better understanding, especially now that you've set up a meeting with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Can you confirm or?
Yes. I mean, I can confirm that, but as you can imagine, it will have to be incremental because all of this is done. Yeah. So just so you know, we'll figure out a methodology to that we can bite off little pieces of this elephant for the panel over a period of time. And of course, a lot of that work will be done in, initial work would be done in the subcommittees.
Right. I think if we can get some type of a draft timeline, that's really why I've been asking for the project plan, really to look at it as like a draft timeline, not saying it's, written in stone, but then we have an idea of what your plan is, like what's next steps, like how you perceive this is going to give us all the information we need to make a decision come March, whatever.
Yeah.
We just need an idea. We don't know how you're moving forward. It's just that each meeting we get new information without having time to think about it or know where it's going. So if we could kind of get some little timeline, like within the next month, we need the timeline now, but what are you going to be doing in the next month? So we know how this project is going to progress and what areas you're specifically going to be looking at, discussing, and what questions we're going to have answered with each step. That would be
Okay.
helpful.
All right, understood. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I know we have.
Lisa, I'm sorry. I think Stephanie was trying to ask a question.
Yes, back to the 3 different scenarios, just real quick. It just seems to me it's a little bit of a mission creep when the bill talked about youth sports, arts, and recreation in the House bill. And I know there's all these support pieces to that. We kind of have to think about that when we're making that decision, but it seems to me the original intent of the House bill was youth sports, arts, and recreation. And now we're talking, I mean, it's on the bifurcation of the entire department on here. So that just seems like a big mission creep to me here.
And I totally agree with that.
One of the tasks that we have listed is to consider any potential benefit of transferring the responsibility. That's one of the items that's listed for us to investigate.
But it's not indicating that it's to transfer the responsibility of a whole department, is it? Oh, yes.
It is, whether it should just be a portion or all.
Well, I'm pretty sure we won't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty hard task to accomplish in a few months.
Yeah. Right. Any further questions? Barry Dunn, did you have anything else?
No, just gonna do next steps here. We are gonna skip over the introduction of the Youth and Conowad Sports Strategic Plan. You've just been given access to that, so you have some reading to do. And we were just going to introduce that anyway, for discussion, for the next time. And we will be in touch with you via email about on-site meeting and a draft schedule for that, to invite you all to a meeting at the end of the day, we believe on January 10th. So we'd make that at the end of the day after we've met with the groups that we need to meet with. And then we will be in touch with you via email. Each one of the facilitators will be in touch with the subcommittee members to set up the first subcommittee meeting. We believe at this point it'll be in January, though, the first ones for that. And then, of course, your homework today is just to review that, strategic plan, which is called Game On. So with that, I will close it out and turn it back to Ryan, I guess.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have any other questions or concerns at all?
Okay. Hearing none. I just want to make sure, no further questions, correct? I can't see everyone's hands if they're raising them, so I'm asking for verbal acknowledgement.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. This is Bill Shin. I don't have a question of just what we covered. I didn't know if I can ask. I have a question regarding the listening session next Tuesday. I didn't know if is now the appropriate time to ask that question.
It depends on the question. What do you have?
Yeah, no, I was just knowing that that's next on this group's schedule, and I just wanted to make sure that we were prepared and all understood what the, our role would be, or topics, things like that.
Barry Dunn, do you have what topics will be discussed at the listening session on the 20th?
Actually, this is, go ahead. I was going to turn it over to you, Ryan.
Yeah. So the listening session scheduled for next week will be concerning youth sports. We'll be hearing from Prince George's County residents with regards to their views and experiences with regards to youth sports programming here in the county. That can range from really run the gamut across that subject matter, but we've gotten pretty good response so far from residents who signed up to the worksheet. It's been advertised on all of the county's media channels, and I believe on Park and Planning's media channels as well. So but thanks, Bill, for the reminder for that. And if anyone is watching and has not signed up and wishes to participate, please do so by going to any one of our media channels where our social media assets are, and feel free to sign up to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Hearing no further discussion, this meeting is adjourned at 3:06 p.m. Anything else? Ryan?
All good.
All right. Thank you.
Everybody.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.